further ado, I am thrilled to welcome the first speakers of the day. We have Dina Fierros, Vice President of Global Digital Strategy and Social Engagement at Nars Cosmetics. And her session will be moderated by Deanna Fay, Head of Field Sales at Quadcast. Hi, Deanna.
Great. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Brand Innovators, for having us here. I'm thrilled to be a part of the conversation with Dina today around new media.
Did we lose Deanna?
I believe so.
I hope she comes back. We need her.
If not, we'll have some fun. Wonder what happened. Let's see.
I'm sure she'll be back in a moment.
Yeah, I bet. Dina, are you based in New York City?
I am. I am coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm close by. I'm in East Village for now.
Very nice.
Yeah. Have you gone back into the office yet?
I have a couple of times, mostly to do a supermarket sweep of my belongings, less so to work.
Deanna is back. Welcome back. And you might have to unmute yourself. Oh, there you go.
What a way to start, right? Can you hear me now?
Keeping us on our toes.
I'm so sorry about that. Okay. Do over. Thank you so much, Brand Innovators, for having us here today. I'm thrilled to be a part of this conversation with Dina around new media and emerging channels. Before we jump in, for those of you who are not familiar with Quadcast, we are a global advertising technology company who ourselves have been evolving through all things crazy and beautiful on the internet for the last 15 years. And in the past couple of years, we've created an intelligent audience platform through the power of our own AI and machine learning, which empowers brands, ad agencies, and publishers to truly know and grow their audiences so that they can be really smart about how they advertise on the open internet. So the most exciting part of my job at Quadcast is being able to connect with brands and marketers and understanding what's important to them and learning about the consumers who are always at the forefront of everything that we all do in this space. So with that said, I'm joined here today by Dina Fierro, who is the Vice President of Global Digital Strategy and Social Engagement at Nars Cosmetics. Dina's led a really strong career to date as a leader in digital strategy for major beauty and fashion brands. Prior to Nars, she spent over 3 years as Global Director of Digital Media and Marketing for Christian Louboutin. And Dina, I'd love to have you tell us a bit more about yourself and about your current role at Nars Cosmetics and the priorities that you're focused on day to day for the brand.
Sure, happy to. Thanks for the nice introduction, Deanna. I appreciate it. Hi, everyone. So I'm Dina. I'm the VP of Global Digital Strategy and Social Engagement for Nars. I joined the business in January of 2019. My oversight at Nars is relatively broad and encompasses the majority of our digital touch points globally, inclusive of owned social media, paid media globally, as well as innovation. So as it relates to innovation, that's obviously a little bit of a gray area. All different brands define that in all different ways. But for myself and for my team, it tends to mean, programs that are first to market or first to portfolio and that really capitalize on emerging spaces on platform, in media, and kind of even, leveraging technology. So that's something that I'm personally really passionate about. In terms of our, areas of focus at Nars, the brand is obviously quite mature. We're one of the leading prestige beauty brands in the world, in the top 10. And, for us, it is really all about, driving kind of brand equity and points of differentiation in the minds of the consumer. I think that's incredibly important, especially when we think about color cosmetics specifically, because it is such a crowded space. And frankly, there's been so much disruption in the past several years, which is honestly really exciting as a consumer and really invigorating as a marketer. So some of the objectives that we're focusing on specific to emerging surfaces, it really does tend to be about acquisition, about reaching new audiences and recruiting them to the brand. We're certainly quite focused on, CRM, data capture, and enrichment, obviously, becoming more and more challenging as we look at what's happening around the world and platform side. And then lastly, kind of reinforcing and building loyalty from our core consumers. So I will say that, my role is probably scoped a bit differently maybe than some of the media or marketing leaders who might be joining us for the conversation in the audience, in that a lot of the initiatives that I work on are really focused on brand position, equity, high level awareness, as well as engagement. Does that help?
That's great. It's wonderful. Thank you, Dina. And being that Nars is such a major beauty brand, I'm sure so much of the marketing has been centered on tried and true media, right? But in focusing today on the emerging channels that everyone wants to hear about, tell us about the channels you're focused on at Nars and what is considered new and emerging for the brand itself.
Sure, that's a great question. I will say, of course, we're obviously still really invested in platforms like Facebook and Google. They're incredibly important partners to us and, really effective channels for us to kind of drive against our media objectives. That said, we really do look at emerging media as an avenue to recruit new audiences and to differentiate the brand. Some of the platforms that we're really interested in and have been testing in some cases for some time, include some of the emerging social platforms and surfaces. So for example, TikTok, Reddit, or Twitch. We actually launched, for example, in 2019, not only our brand channel on TikTok, but also really one of the very first global hashtag challenges from a prestige beauty brand. So we were really very early to test and learn in that space. And it's a place where we've continued, for example, to allocate more and more significant investment. We're also really interested and have done some nascent tests in select markets in connected TV. Digital and social audio, as well as voice. I think those are all super interesting spaces where we see a lot of innovation happening. And then lastly, I'm personally pretty passionate about gaming as an opportunity, and we've done some programs in that space through both creators and in-game integrations. So I think one of the things that we'll see in the coming months and years is kind of more and more of those in-game media opportunities open up to advertisers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think, obviously at Comcast, we're really interested in audience insights. So it's interesting that you bring up the gaming audience. Are you able to speak a little bit about some of the differentiators you see amongst your audience itself, whether it's, gamers versus another segment of audience for NARS?
I think honestly, one of the most interesting things about gaming is that there is actually a really inherent connectivity to beauty and to personal care. And so, for example, when we look at a lot of the most relevant and most interesting gaming creators, many of whom are female, in terms of the types of creators we'd be targeting, but certainly not exclusively. They're actually, influencers who are really, really tapped into and really passionate about beauty and getting ready, for example, for Twitch streams. That's something that is very inherent to kind of how they create and share content. So I think, understanding that really opened up a world of opportunity for us as it relates to gaming. So as of now, I can't speak kind of to the gaming programs that are to come. We will be launching 2 really interesting in-game integrations in Q3. But we have to date launched a really compelling kind of custom content program within Animal Crossing. And we've also been testing quite a bit in terms of audience targeting as it relates to gaming, most notably on platforms like Twitch and Reddit. And then we've also been doing quite a bit of creator engagement, both in an earned and a paid capacity. And all of those programs have been incredibly successful, both quantitatively, but also qualitatively. And that's definitely something that we really do consider when we're looking at the success of kind of emerging media investments in emerging spaces.
Yeah, that's great. Great, thank you. And I know, just kind of going back to your point about Facebook and social media, NARS has over 8 million Instagram followers, not surprising given the quality and passion around the world for your products. With social media itself constantly emerging and introducing new formats, with the latest being Instagram Reels. It really gives consumers and brand loyalists a place to be a part of that conversation, to give them that equity and part of the community that you discussed earlier, with the brands that they love. On the Nars site, I noticed there's a live chat option for customers and potential customers to be able to connect with an artist or a product. So between that feature and the various ways that your consumers are engaging through these new social media tactics and channels, what strategies are you looking to test in order to connect with those consumers in a more intimate way?
I mean, there's a lot that we've been executing in the past year. Obviously, 2020 was a time of transformative change for our business for really obvious reasons. And it did force us, and I think this was a very positive thing, to kind of accelerate a lot of our efforts, in particular, many of our efforts as it relates to augmented reality, live and social selling. So, I think that the live and social selling piece is definitely a space that my team is digging into, and there are some really interesting emerging platforms actually within that space specific to beauty. And I think, just to double click on one of the points you were making, Deanna, it's interesting to see that it's not only, for example, established creators and influencers who are driving that content creation in that community, but it's actually also our consumers. So for example, there's a live stream app called Super Great that has a bit of traction in the beauty space, and some members of the audience might be familiar with it. And it's so fascinating to see how consumers, it isn't just about posting an image to Instagram anymore. It isn't just about kind of sharing something casually to Instagram stories, but they really are adopting a lot of the behaviors that we see from influencers in terms of the types of content that they're creating for their audiences, even though their audiences are in most cases much smaller. So I think there's definitely something really interesting there. As it relates to media, we don't necessarily see the scale in those platforms just yet, but at the same time, we do like to be really early and to find our footing and establish a strategy while those platforms are still emerging and are still evolving, because it just allows us, I think, to execute much more seamlessly when the audience is there. Yeah,
absolutely. That totally makes sense. And what does the process look like for your team in staying up to, it used to be the speed of light, the speed of sound, the speed of the internet, right? And approaching these new media channels, and then how they factor into your overall marketing strategy for Nars?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the brand, we really, included in our values is innovation. And so it's really important to us that we look at emerging channels as an opportunity, again, to drive against our values and to reinforce our positioning in the eyes of consumers. We believe that emerging platforms present a really strong opportunity for us as a brand to reach and engage those new audiences. And so at a global level, we really do set the tone for that kind of investment. We set the strategy, and then that strategy is adapted by market. So for example, Nars is distributed in 44 or 45 markets globally. And our markets really do vary significantly in terms of maturity, level of media investment, and sophistication. So when we look at our most mature markets, certainly our top 10 and potentially even beyond, we actually do have a requisite percentage of their digital media investment that is intended to support test and learn opportunities in emerging spaces. And at a high level, my team kind of, again, develops the POV around the areas that we think are most interesting. But I think especially when we look at regions of the world like APAC, there's a lot of nuance in APAC, and there's a lot of nuance, frankly, by market, not just by region. And so it is ultimately a really close partnership between my team at a global level, and, for example, our regional and local stakeholders, who in turn educate us on what the emerging opportunities are in their respective markets. So I know that was kind of, really high level. Hopefully it answered your question. And obviously, we can definitely dig deeper on that.
Yeah, no, that's really great. And I think, you bring up a lot of great points just about how you have to think about things from different markets and different areas of the globe. Obviously, on a global perspective, so many brands have had to drastically rethink where and how they spend their media budgets over the last year and a half, because of consumer behavior shifts that were brought on by the pandemic. At a high level, talk us through if and how you've had to do so, and kind of how you've had to diversify your strategy so that you stay successful within the beauty space for Nars.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of, two, I think, really important adaptations to our strategy. I think first and foremost, especially in 2020, we were definitely focused in terms of investment on tried and true platforms. So, for example, we did actually put a pause on a lot of our test and learn opportunities in more emerging platforms in 2020, because we just absolutely, given the state of our business, I mean, anyone and everyone can imagine that color cosmetics did not have a good year in 2020. I had to be persuaded to put on makeup for this chat today. So, we really, really wanted to focus our investment on tried and true platforms and mediums. We also focus less, I would say, on high level awareness media, and much more so on consideration and kind of lower funnel conversion driving tactics. And then secondarily, we definitely did also shift our focus in terms of course, the types of launches and the types of products that we were focused on. And we continue to do so, because I think that, there were some temporary changes as it relates to consumer behavior and makeup. And then there were potentially some more permanent shifts that we actually see, for example, Gen Z driving. So at Nars, thankfully, we do have a lot of really iconic products, in particular iconic products in complexion, which was and remains a category that people are still investing in particular kind of products that bridge that gap, that are more skincare complexion hybrids. And then we also see, honestly, now in 2021, despite the concerning news around things like the Delta variant, we have seen actually a return to makeup. And I think, what people who don't understand makeup really don't understand is that it is such an important mechanism for self-expression. And I think, in quote unquote, coming out of the pandemic earlier this spring, there was a real renewed sense of optimism and a real desire for consumers to be able to express themselves through color. I think we're also seeing that play out in fashion. And so it's been really interesting, I think, to focus again on a lot of that complexion that the consumer is so interested in, and then also on some of our core color products.
Yeah, that's great. And I personally can relate to so much of what you said. I did the full face today, but it's normally just what can I get away with for the virtual calls? But I definitely felt, that return of makeup, that return of putting on the full face, as we opened back up a bit. But you lead me into a good thought about the different trends on, whether it's application or just content consumption when it comes to the beauty space. For example, personally, I've had more time to digest content at home during the past year and a half than I would have, chosen to engage with when my life was a bit more, let's say, on the run or on the go. And some of those, as it pertains to beauty space, has been watching, how makeup artists, whether they're really modest influence or someone as A-list as J-Lo, how they apply their makeup, right? Are there trends like this that you anticipate continuing to take new shape and form over the coming months and years?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And I think it actually comes back to a topic that we were addressing earlier in our chat as well, around just that rise, for example, of more native and more consumer driven content. I think one of the things that we see in beauty as well, and it's something that I observe as a consumer of fashion, is that there's a real appetite from the consumer to see themselves reflected and represented in advertising. I find that really invigorating. But, particularly when we think about more consideration level media and conversion driving media, we really do find that that needs to be much more natively produced. And in many instances, for example, we are relying on influencer generated content to kind of bring the consumer through to that point of purchase. And we also find, for example, Nars is a prestige brand. We do have a very, I would say, aspirational positioning. And one of the things that's interesting to observe, and I think this isn't always what people expect, but the consumer does, for example, actually want and desire more elevated content from a brand like Nars. It's what they've come to expect from the brand. And if we don't deliver upon that, they kind of don't even recognize it as being an asset from the brand, regardless of where it's being delivered. So for us, it's really about walking that fine line of aspiration and approachability. And one of the areas that we've definitely been leaning into quite a bit, it's the more sensorial kind of application and payoff style content, which I think you kind of referenced to a certain degree, but people want, especially with so many people buying color cosmetics, not to mention everything else online, they really want to feel as confident in their purchase as possible. And that type of content helps instill that confidence in the product.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love this point about aspirational positioning. I think, and I see it a little bit amongst the competition, noticing brands like Charlotte Tilbury, right? They utilize their social platform as well for these visual demonstrations of product usage. And then also information around product ingredients. I think that's something too that's become increasingly important in the environmentally conscious world we live in. So do you feel like, those educational avenues are essential to staying relevant amongst, competitive space that you're in? Or what ways does Nars, differentiate themselves amongst the competition and keep that aspirational positioning top of mind?
That's a good question. And I can tell you're definitely a beauty lover. I do think it's really interesting because ingredients have become more and more important. And I think that the consumer is more and more aware of the ingredients in the products that they're choosing. And in fact, one of the things that we do observe kind of, across the makeup and even just the general beauty space is that consumers are really, using ingredients as a mechanism for discovery. So, across the industry, we're actually seeing fewer, let's say, brand or product specific searches and more searches that are centered on ingredients. And that's kind of the entry point from a discovery standpoint. So I think that's quite interesting. And one of the ways that we've leaned into that, I've mentioned complexion, and hopefully there are a lot of members of the audience that are familiar with Nars complexion, but our product development team is frankly unparalleled. And a lot of our complexion products really do incorporate, ingredients that are beneficial, not only for short-term results, but ultimately for long-term skin health. And so something that we've actually been doing quite a bit more of is messaging more assertively around those ingredients, not only across, for example, owned surfaces like D2C and social, but also through media. And it's quite interesting to see how those calls to action can be incredibly effective in targeting consumers that are really invested in beauty.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And I know you mentioned CTV before, and and also obviously a need for the business is much more hyper focused digitally now, especially with brick and mortar stores over the last year and a half probably having suffered, right? And I know, even for myself, I typically go into a Sephora or a Macy's where I can engage with the brand before I purchase it. So how do you see media partnerships, especially in a channel like CTV, where many of us have been spending more time? How do you see a channel like this evolving as we head into 2022?
I will say I am not an expert in CTV. We have done some initial tests, most recently as part of our Pure Radiant Tinted Moisturizer launch this spring. We had some really beautiful kind of high level awareness assets that we deployed through connected TV. And we did find that they were incredible. That it was an incredibly effective channel, for example, to drive brand lift and consideration. That said, I do know that there's strong potential actually for more direct response application in connected TV, but I have to be honest and say that that's not something that we've yet explored. We're hopeful that we'll get there in 2022. I do think, a couple of the things that are most interesting about connected TV for me, it's just, the ability to really target audiences quite precisely. And also, the ability to do, I guess you would kind of consider it more psychographic targeting. So I think that there are some really interesting brand alignments there for us to explore. And I've actually been observing, other brands, including a couple of brands in the beauty space like Glossier, that have done an exceptional job of that audience targeting through connected. So it's a space I'm honestly really interested to learn more about. And I'll be tuning in maybe to some upcoming programming from brand innovators as well to learn a bit more myself.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and I would imagine, especially in this space and in this time where we can be so easily exposed to our competitors, to what the competition is doing, we almost all become one large community, right? And learn from each other, but then have to find these ways of standing out too, right? And putting out there the best products that are going to speak to our consumers. So you guys are doing some great stuff. In fact, yes, I am a narcissist. So before we open it up for questions from the group, one for fellow narcissists like myself, what are new and emerging products or beauty trends that we can be on the lookout for from Nars as we head into 2022? Can you give us a little teaser? I know you mentioned complexion being a big focus for Nars. Are there any other kind of teasers you can give us from the brand itself or focus point?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of what we have upcoming, we actually did just introduce a shade extension to our Power Matte lip pigments. I don't know if you've ever used them, Deanna. If not, I might have to send you a couple. But we just did a shade extension on that product. And I have to tell you, again, unbiased, I'm actually saying this more as a beauty consumer than as an employee of Nars, but that's definitely one of the most incredible longwear formulas on the market. I mean, you could literally put yourself to bed in Power Matte lip pigment and wake up with it, and it will be pristine and unbothered. And then we do have actually our biggest ever global launch that will be coming in early 2022. That is a launch in the complexion category. It will be, kind of a product that is, it sort of meets a need within our portfolio. And I think it also meets a consumer need in terms of the type of ingredients, points of differentiation, and also the type of finish that, she or he is looking for.
Great. Yeah, that's great. And we'll definitely stay tuned and look for all of these things in the emerging channels everywhere across the internet, as well as on the Nars site. This has been really great and informative. And I know every company and every brand has their own process and their own viewpoint, right? From when it comes to what's important for them from these emerging channels, and really appreciate you, Dina, taking us through what those platforms and channels look like for Nars. At Quancast, our latest focus has been the rollout of providing marketers and consumers with the ability to activate, engage through connected TV, which we spoke a little bit about because we are seeing that on the rise in our space. But we'd love to hear from the audience on their thoughts and around this topic. What questions do you have for Dina about the trends in new and emerging media channels at Nars? Feel free to let us know by dropping it into the Q&A here, and I will be on the lookout for any questions you guys have for Dina.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't be shy, especially if you're of the passion points of me. You have a great opportunity here. And while we look, oh, here we go. All right. Do you find that podcast as a new and emerging platform, Dina?
That is such a good question and very top of mind for me as a very avid podcast listener. So podcasts are definitely, a medium that we would bucket within the digital audio space, which we didn't spend a lot of time talking about today, but it is an area that we're focused on. So we have done some nascent tests in podcasts, and we did that in a very, I would say, high touch kind of way. So, one of the things that we observe is that I think host-read ads on podcasts are incredibly effective. And so even though, there's an opportunity to deploy obviously programmatic through that medium, in the tests that we've done, we've taken a very hands-on approach to identifying precisely the podcasts and precisely the hosts that we wanted to work with for those pilots. And I have to say, it's been really, really interesting to see, again, how effective even more niche podcasts can be actually at driving traffic and impacting sales. So it's a space that we hope to do more of in 2022. I think one of the challenges right now is that there isn't a lot of measurement, at least, to my understanding, there isn't a lot of measurement that we have on podcasts. So we right now try to treat them more as either awareness channels or direct response channels. I hope that helps.
Awesome. Thank you, Dina. Yes. Another question from the audience. Has the crisis forced modifications to short, mid, long-term goals and how you measure success based on changes in consumer behavior?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to overstate the impact that COVID has had on our strategy. I think at a very base level, there were really, really significant changes to our product launch strategy and therefore our media and marketing strategy, given not only kind of supply chain disruption, but also the relevance of products and launches to consumers. So frankly, that's something that we're still managing. I do think I'm honestly in a very privileged place working for a brand like Nars. And I mean that sincerely, because we're a brand that has a tremendous amount of equity. Our consumers are really, really passionate. And so all things considered, our business is in a really healthy place in August of 2021, but it's definitely been a really challenging 16 months.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah, another question coming in. How do you not navigate content creation for a platform like TikTok, a very heavily influenced Gen Z driven media channel, while still maintaining the NARS overall brand image?
Such a good question. I love this one, Jackie. Thank you. It's a fine line. So I think, what's most important on TikTok, and I think that this has and will continue to change, frankly, in the next 6 to 18 months, but the content really does have to feel native to platform. So the approach that we have taken to date in terms of both media and also owned content is really a focus on personality-led content that is developed not only by creators, but also by NARS makeup artists around the world. And so, there are a couple of different types of content that work really well for us. I think certainly artistry-driven content. We're a brand with a really strong artistry POV. And then also the same type of content that Deanna, you and I were talking about earlier in terms of really visceral, sensorial application and payoff, almost leaning into that kind of visual ASMR category. So those are the types of content right now that you'll see on our channel and through our media, if you're served any of our media. I do think, though, that this is a super relevant question for me, because one of the things that myself and my team, have been working on is really vetting a lot of external agency partners to identify partners who can create content that feels elevated and appropriate, but also native to platform. And I have to be honest, even among the preferred agency partners recommended by TikTok, I did not find an agency that felt like the right fit for NARS. So the work continues, Jackie.
That's gotta be, that's another subject in and of itself, right? Finding the partners that can really have that same, level of where you want to go with strategy and care about the brand and put it out there in the way that you need them to. So yeah, Jackie, thanks for the question. That was great. also just brings up another great point. I know it seems like every day there's a new app and there's a new thing to keep up with. TikTok being, I don't even know if it's the most recent, but it's the most recent one. I get, friends sending me TikToks on, and I'm like, I need to learn more about engaging with this. So do you find yourself having to personally engage and learn all these platforms to be able to know how to then represent the brand through them?
I mean, definitely. I think that frankly, that is sadly in some ways that, it's fundamental. It's really, really important. And I think, it's impossible to craft a meaningful strategy without spending significant time in all of these platforms, because it just really gives you an understanding of what's resonating within the community, the types of content that the community is sharing, creators are developing, and other brands are producing. So, thankfully, TikTok is a wonderfully entertaining platform to spend time within. So it's not a burden whatsoever. But yeah, that's something we do a lot of.
Yeah, I'd say entertaining is an understatement. And then we probably got time for one more question here. Thank you, Becky Yang. Is Pinterest a space they found effective, and how have you used it, if so?
Another great question. Yeah, so Pinterest actually is a platform that we're quite invested in. I will say so from an own standpoint and also an innovation standpoint, we were an early partner, for example, to Pinterest on the rollout of their augmented reality try-on. But from a global standpoint, I'm less involved in the day-to-day just because Pinterest is still largely a US platform. So when I, for example, work on strategies and rollouts, they do tend to be more global in nature. They generally touch all of our key regions around the world. But Pinterest is a space where we've actually significantly increased our media investment, for example, in the past 18 months. And I think that it is a space where we've seen quite a bit of success. I'm curious to see, frankly, how the platform continues to evolve, because they, like every other social platform, have, recently kind of re-begun courting and incentivizing creators. So I'm interested to see from a brand standpoint what additional kinds of opportunity that unlocks. But great question from Becky. I'm very curious to know what she does, because I enjoyed both of her questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dina. This has been so great for me, I'm sure for the audience, and thank you, brand innovators, for giving us a place and a time to talk about these important, ever-evolving trends in the digital space and put our heads together around how we can all thrive through them. This has been great.
Thank you, Deanna.
Thanks so much, Deanna. That was such a fun fireside chat. Loved hearing how well Nars is doing. Love how cheeky the brand is, no pun intended, and seeing how well you guys are doing. Keep going with all the success, and we hope to hear from you both soon again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
All right, we're off to our next session. Next up on the stage, we have Kate Brady, Head of Media Innovation and Partnership Development at PepsiCo, and her session will be moderated by Barrett Roberts, Head of Industry CPG at Innovid. Hi, Barrett.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I think I just learned a whole new term in putting on your full face today.
Amazing.
Mine's all set.
Same. Hi, Kate. How are you?
How are you? I'm great.
Good. Good to see you in the flesh.
Same.
All right. I'll let you both take it away. You look like we're ready to go.
Perfect. Sounds good. So Pearl, thanks for the introduction. Hello, everyone out there. My name is Barrett Roberts. I'm the CPG Head of Industry at Innovid. Just in case you're not familiar with Innovid, it is a leading independent omnichannel advertising and analytics platform that's built for television. We use data to enable the personalization, delivery, and measurement of ads across the widest breadth of channels, including TV, video, display, social, audio, and digital out of home. Our platform seamlessly connects all media with delivering superior advertising experiences across the audience journey, and serves a global client base of brands, agencies, and publishers through the 15 offices across Americas, Europe, and Asia Pacific. As you guys can tell, I obviously just read that. And part of it's because I'm 90 days new to Innovid and very excited to join. I've spent the majority of my career on the media side, both at Twitter and Pandora prior to joining as the CPG head of industry, leading the CPG practice here at Innovid. Prior to that, I was actually at Unilever on both the brand and the media side. And the thing that I love the most about this conversation today is that Kate and I spent so much of our careers on the PepsiCo business as I worked on the agency side at OMD Chicago, primarily on Gatorade, but also spent some time definitely on Captain Crunch Life and that crazy little character called Quisp, right? So with that, I think you guys have heard enough about me. Kate, welcome, and I'd love to give you a chance to introduce yourself. You're no stranger to the BI audience, obviously, but just in case people have missed you, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much, Barrett. So great to be here today. As you said, we have some crossover with some PepsiCo brands, but I have now been with PepsiCo for over 11 years, which is crazy, but spent my first decade roughly in marketing on the agency side as well, worked across a number of different media shops, and then transitioned to client side working at Pepsi in 2010, where I started in the PBNA beverages media strategy team. And through that time, I have worked on every beverage that is in our portfolio, with the exception of Gatorade, where it's in a different sector for those familiar with our business. But what has been great is over the last 2 years, I've actually migrated into a new role within the organization. My remit has expanded to global, and now I cover all brands, including Gatorade, to help drive media innovation and partnership development across the organization. And it's been a fantastic ride, and I'm so thrilled. I think I have the best job in PepsiCo and maybe in the industry. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And Kate, I think, just in our initial discussions, it sounded like, yes, you've been there for 11 years, but it's absolutely not business as usual. So how do you guys make sure, pardon the pun, the soda doesn't fall flat kind of a thing, and make sure that you're kind of staying ahead of the curve, right?
Yeah, so great question. And so part of the reason that my role was built within the organization is that our leadership recognized that there's been this transition and shift in the media landscape, and we need to have a team dedicated to really being on the forefront of what's new, what's next, and what will be the best way for us to connect with our consumers. And so that's what really my job is all about, is identifying those business challenges that we have within the organization, and then partnering with either startups or with our larger investment partners to find solutions that we can then share across the organization, provide that visibility. And then with those smaller startup type of partners, whether it's integrating within our deeper partnership or bringing just across the organization at scale, that's been our primary focus. And so the past couple of years have been really helping drive that agenda and just really making it as seamless as possible. And we're now on our third rotation of what we call our Pepsico Labs program, which is something that has been one of the best experiences I could have ever asked for at PepsiCo or just in my career.
That's the most amazing that, especially CPGs can become so large and so matrixed, right? So I love that you've built out kind of the engine within the engine to make the bigger engine work bigger, right? And better kind of a thing.
Yeah. And and it's no small feat with a massive organization like PepsiCo is. You couldn't find a more matrixed org, but we have developed this systematic process over the past couple of years that's really helped us drive this agenda in a very turnkey fashion, and really gets the exposure all the way up to our C-suite, which is really, really phenomenal. And we see it's amazing to be a part of what's changing the marketing efforts across the organization. So it's a really proud moment to be a part of that team.
Congratulations. Perfect.
Thank you.
Good. So just to set the stage for the topic of today for brand innovators, which is really around the future of media, right? Can you share, we're not going to play this advertising music, but can you share kind of the 15-month journey that PepsiCo brands have been on over the last almost year and a half at this point, and perhaps entering into the next chapter as we're talking?
So yes, much like every other company out there, it has been a challenging year and a half. And Sadly, I don't know that we're on I was hopeful a few months ago that maybe we were going to be coming out of this quickly, but it seems like we might have taken a step back, which is unfortunate. But we've learned a lot through this process, and I think it has truly transformed the way that we will go to market in the future. From PepsiCo as a whole, we saw behaviors that we were not expecting, but we're very fortunate for PepsiCo from a pantry loading perspective. So when this all happened, we saw people buying in bulk and people really making sure that they had stocked snacks, beverages, food supplies, which really benefited us, which was great. But it also presented a lot of challenges. We did not have the resources and the staff to really ensure that our shelves were continuing to stay stocked as needed and that we could supply what our customers were looking for. So it required a lot of shifts of resources to make sure that we were supplying our employees with the right PPE to keep them safe and to keep them protected and really valuing the work that they were doing out there. So it was a bit of a journey. It was also interesting to see how things had shifted through this time and products that really had a resurgence. So like Quaker Oatmeal, the Quaker brand saw huge spikes in their sales because people were at home and we're in a different, good old Quaker. But people were at home and doing things that they hadn't been in the past where they were typically on the go. But it also changed from that on the go mention. When we are a very on the go type of portfolio of brands for the most part. And so it changed how our mix was in the marketplace. So when you think about your convenience and gas and those single serve 20-ounce bottles or single bags of chips, those really weren't what was driving our volume. And so it definitely adjusted how we had to look at things and where our mix was. And so that was definitely an experience that we needed to take into consideration as we thought for the future. On the flip side, as I mentioned, I do think it really transformed how we think about going to market, about how we allocate our media. And with people staying home, we saw an explosion in the e-com space. And I've seen different stats, but I know that we've seen over 5 years of growth in the e-com space in a 10-month period for what was trended or what we were expecting. So that really did, while we were already on a journey to accelerate our e-com capabilities internally, it definitely did help drive additional priorities against that channel. So that's something that, we are always looking at. How can we do that click to purchase or those opportunities in the future? Additionally, we saw I know I was watching a lot more TV at home. I did cut the cord during this past year. I know we saw a lot of that happening and a lot of just increased CTV usage. And so as a whole, that's a behavior that we need to ensure. And we've been on these journeys, but I think it just only accelerated. So we recognized that CTV was going to be the future, but it accelerated the need for really understanding and ensuring that we had it as a right part of our overall mix. And then I think the biggest thing that we took away from this, though, was the need for flexibility to future-proof our brands and our business as we move forward. And so when we think about the traditional ways that we had gone to market in the past, some of those really handcuffed us in what our capabilities of movement and agility are. And so it was really imperative as we thought for any future investments that we built the flexibility, whether it's from shifting across different platforms or just the ability to pull back and reallocate as needed, given unfortunately, I don't know that what we saw this past year is going to be the last time that something like that happens. So we need to ensure that we are really in control of what we're doing.
Yeah, hopefully the silver lining out of all this is that maybe 2020 and first half of 2021 was the practice lap. And now that everyone's warmed up and ready to go, we can kind of put it into practice. You're right. I mean, tons of insights coming from everywhere, right? During my time at Pandora, we saw obviously audio listening going way down in the car and skyrocketing, exploding in consumers' homes because people were so sick of the old voices in their own homes that they were hopeful to hear another one.
It's so funny, but I think it represents so many opportunities that arise out of this as well. So on those are those other silver linings. It's like what really has been launched out of these tragic events.
And that's one of the things I think that's been interesting for me in moving from the media side to the ad tech side, is that now we're the pipes of how it all works, right? And so we can literally look at an advertiser or a CPG advertiser's campaign and see the re-expression, as you're talking about the need for allocate that flexibility and allocations and that type of thing. When we look across mobile and desktop and CTV, those, as you just alluded to, not only in consumer behavior, but also in real time, we saw shifting happening of advertisers moving those impressions and those video impressions in a lot of cases to that behavior because it was happening. So interesting to see it happening in real time through the tech, but that's what enabled the entire transition, right?
Yeah.
The other thing you talked about was just the shoppability piece, right? And I know 10 years ago, dated, but at Unilever, we used to say, 90% of our sales are happening in store. We need to spend so much time in Bentonville and Minneapolis and get it done there, of course. And by the way, there's this e-com thing. And I totally agree with you. I have so many requests onto the other side of the pendulum, right? Of shoppability. I think in the beginning of this year, as people are kind of coming back to focusing on the in-store, it just drives home this whole point of making sure we're enabling commerce to happen in any channel at any moment. And I've begun to kind of refer to the big screen TV in your living room, perhaps as the new storefront for CPG, just because of the opportunity for interactivity. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with your comment of all about new experiences and what that looks like. Okay, if we can transition, something that's not new is the television upfront. And amidst the history of what's happened in the last 15 years, I have to imagine that this television upfront has been like no other. So without getting into any fine details of any one PepsiCo deal, could you give us just a peek under the tent or behind the curtain from a marketer's view? How was this upfront different, and how did you navigate this time in the space, really?
Yeah, and I think I alluded to it a bit in my previous statements, but I think the upfront continues to be a place where PepsiCo will invest. We do recognize the content and the deals that we can secure there, but we also recognize that the linear audiences are continuing to shrink. That we need to find solutions to provide that incremental reach, and because of those realities, we do have this strong focus on agility and flexibility to future-proof our business. And so a lot of that is, how do we find these cross-channel extensions so that we can really deliver our message to those audiences when it's going to resonate most to them, and that can be across multiple screens. How do we recognize that the growth of CTV is exploding, and it's such a huge component of what we need to be doing. But we also, through the upfront, we need to ensure it's our efficiency driver. And so how do we make sure that what we're going to market with, the deals that we're negotiating, while we see the significant value and effectiveness from a CTV perspective, we need to make sure that the increase in effectiveness isn't being offset by the premium pricing. And currently, the reality is that it's still a very premium marketplace. And so while the linear space is also becoming a very seller's market, and it's been challenging because while the ratings are going down, the pricing continues to go up. We need to make sure that we're balancing and making our buys as effective as possible, because for us, we need to ensure that every dollar works harder than the last. And so every dollar that we're putting forth strategically needs to be the right dollar to reach that consumer. Everything that we do at PepsiCo is about consumer centricity and really tying back to the audience. And so that's a key imperative for us. And we know that the upfront does offer us ability to reach those consumers, but it's one of many different areas that we need. And as I mentioned before, the upfront historically is a very, very locked to firm type of space. We've been, our agency has been doing a phenomenal job and working with our partners to ensure that we can drive as much flexibility and agility, as I mentioned earlier, as throughout this process.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, and I think it's not just about new consumer trends and new consumer experiences. But out of all this, there's new tools I think that marketers can leverage, right? And this is relatively nascent. I mean, 45% of advertisers have less than under a year under their belts in working with CTV. So it's one of those things where, you know, we're beginning to work with advertisers like Anheuser-Busch to make sure that they are looking at the totality of their media plan and what that looks like, looking at things like duplication between different sources and resources, reach and frequency, obviously, and then working with them to be able to deliver a result of actually cutting their CPMs almost in half, kind of a thing, or reducing by 45%. So it's absolutely not like a one size fit all situation. And I think that's been the interesting thing also in coming to Innovid is just one, the consultative role, but then two, trying to figure out like, what is it you guys are exactly trying to get done, and how can we put the tools to work and work hard for you, right?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's not a one size fits all. We all have a challenge. Ultimately, we're all just trying to drive as much sales as possible. So that's what it boils down to. How can we make sure it helps deliver on that goal?
Totally. Hey, for the audience, real quick, I just want to give a quick reminder. If you do have any questions, go ahead and plug those into the Q&A box at the bottom, and we will pick those up towards the end of the session. So appreciate that. So Kate, on the note of CTV, and we've talked about it quite a bit already, I want to shift the conversation a little bit to not just a media delivery standpoint, but probably more importantly from a creative standpoint. A lot of the work that we were doing in audio when I was around Pandora was it was a new experience for creatives of put the blindfold on and actually just activate your audio sense. And from there, what do you want to talk to people about, right? And that was a really different experience for a lot of creative minds. As you guys are planning for the big screen and perhaps the opportunity for interactivity within that screen, what is the role of the big screen versus, you know, as you're looking across cross-channel campaigns versus perhaps the smaller screen or the bite-sized screen or the social screen, et cetera? How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, we see a lot of value in both the big screen and those smaller formats or different formats that are out there. I would say that PepsiCo historically, or maybe not historically, but our goal has always been about being a mobile first group of brands. We know that the bulk of our products are consumed on the go. And so it's really critical for us to be able to deliver our message at the point where it's going to resonate most with them. But I think it all comes back to personalization. And that's been another area of focus for us across the organization, and something that we've been leaning in a lot on in the past, and about just being able to dynamically deliver. And I think CTV is helping us be able to deliver it. But I think there's a number of different channels that give us that opportunity to be so personalized and consumer centric, as I mentioned, with our messaging. And through the PepsiCo Labs program that I highlighted in the past, last year's program was all about, we focus on, these big key business challenges for us. Two of the pillars that we focused on were creative excellence and then personalization at scale. And within the personalization at scale, we were able to test a few different platforms that really provide us new opportunities that we hadn't been able to deliver before. One of the partners that we piloted with, a key, I hope they don't mind if I name drop them, but what we were really impressed with, what they were able to deliver is this moments technology. And what they were able to do is leverage the gyroscope in your phone to understand where you were in, if you were running versus sitting back versus, walking. And so it can deliver the right message to you based on that movement so that it truly could engage, and it could deliver you more of an audio based or a video based or a static, depending on those occasions. Outside of just the traditional like geographic specifics or demo specifics and some of those other data signal led delivery mechanisms. And so I think that's something that we find really interesting. And something that we've had, unfortunately, to step away from a little bit over the past year, but I'm hoping to see a resurgence in that as well, is platforms like, gas station TV. We've seen success with that. And it's a really effective tool for a brand like Pepsi or Cheetos or Doritos, when you are at your pump and you're in an engaged situation and you've got, nothing else to do but watch the screen that's there and it's telling you go inside for a 2 for 2 or, some sort of really action oriented creative message really drives action. And so we do look for those occasions, whether it's click to add to cart or if it's just go inside and find those moments that really drive action. And it's all about really understanding what the consumer is doing at that time that we can connect with them best.
Yeah, to me, moments and personalization are they're white hot in CPG. I think they always have been, but the biggest difference being that now you can actually activate on it. Yeah. And we've all been doing this for almost decades in display. But I think even over the last 5 years, figuring out how to dynamically serve creative in the likes of audio, right? And now the thing that I think the majority of people that I'm meeting with are finding most interesting is actually being able to bring those experiences to video and actually make dynamic video and have different creative and messages and visual experiences for every single one of those audiences. Kate, I had spent a bit of time with John Halverson a couple of weeks ago, just talking through the Mondelez business and what's been going on there. John's big push has been around, the push towards not just driving personalization and getting organizationally set up, but also driving that strategy, not just top down from the org standpoint, but across their agency partners as well. But most importantly, around making sure that they're driving ROI along the way and showing increased improvement as they go. So I do want to segue a little bit into the world of measurement. And I think one of the things, unfortunately, maybe or maybe not, CPG tends to be plagued with is that we don't own the cash register, right? A retailer does, or a grocery chain does, or an e-com provider does. So what is PepsiCo's approach on, I'm going to refer to, broadly speaking, marketing mix modeling? Please reiterate what it actually is and how you guys look at that, right?
Yeah, so we have another journey that we've been on. It seems like we're on a lot of journeys at PepsiCo, but another one that we have been really focused on is just how do we better measure our investments? And so we have built out a proprietary tool within PepsiCo that we call the Roi Engine. And it is our take on traditional MMM. I think some of the challenges we'd seen in the past is just feeling like some of the results are modeling work we were seeing was a bit antiquated in its measurement of specifically things like digital channels. And so I think through this effort, we have a very smart team of data scientists, much smarter than that I have no part of helping create, but rely on them to help bring this to life. And we're in the process, really building it out for the US and beyond. And so in the process of scaling it globally at this point, which is really exciting to have this one kind of source of truth across the organization that we can go to, that we have these direct feeds with our partners to ensure that we are getting as granular as we can and in a much more real-time basis. I think another big struggle that I hear often, and I know we were challenged with, is just the lag time in seeing some of the MMM results. And so through the development of our own tools, we're able to help fast track that. And the intent, is to get as faster as we can. So while previously it might have been a year to 9 months, maybe 6 months at best of a look back, we can now do that in a quarterly or less time. And the intent is to get to chop that time down as much as possible so that we truly are working in a real-time fashion to understand what's working harder for us so that we can optimize to just really make sure that, again, every dollar is working harder than the next and optimizing that the best way we can.
Yeah. And then knowing that there is this fixed machine, for lack of a better term, excellent machine, and that's very dynamic and real time. You guys are also, from what I understand, doing additional studies with the likes of Roku on your Quaker brand, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that study, some of the headlines there, but then also, Kate, if you can help us understand, how does a study like that then work with the ROI engine as well, right?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we partnered with Roku. We tested a couple of brands, not just Quaker, but also our Bubbly brands, with the goal of how do we drive incremental reach to what we were seeing in our linear TV, recognizing the challenges that I spoke to earlier. The linear audiences are becoming much more concentrated. We tend to over frequency against some of those audiences. And so through this effort, we tie it back to, with the Roku one, it was tied back to an NCS sales study as well as some brand lift metrics. But we saw, not surprisingly, I think our hypothesis going into it was that it was probably going to work, but it's great to have the proof points and the data behind it that it did. And we saw positive brand lift, we saw positive sales attribution, we saw strong ROI. But really, I mean, we saw incremental reach to the tune of double digits for each of the brands compared to what we were able to deliver with our just traditional linear TV buys. And so it really did supply us as the proof point that we can't just rely on the linear TV to help us deliver it. We really need to have these multiple methods and approaches to ensure that we have the most holistic way to reach our audience.
Yeah. Can I push on that for a second too? Because Quaker may or may not be known as the sexiest brand across the globe, right?
It's super sexy.
So it is interesting in some conversations, right? Some people may say, oh, interactive TV, that's for Doritos and Mountain Dew and Cheetos for sure, but not for other brands, kind of a thing. I mean, Kate, you work on every single brand across the globe. How do you handle those conversations? I guess for the audience, we're all kind of working to help marketers understand not only the space, but also the right thing to do for their brand. So how do you counsel them in that situation in thinking through what the brand opportunity might be, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so with Quaker, it's a brand that's been on a great trajectory of seeing growth. But I think that there's, when we see that there's an opportunity to just help fast track that, and we think that we have a solution, that we have a strong hypothesis to do so, it's about doing a quick test. I mean, this wasn't a very long term. So how do we help them, guide them in that process, find the solutions for them, and help on the back end? So my team is really there to help shepherd the process along. Because to your point, I mean, sometimes it's really challenging with some of these brands that just don't have the bandwidth to be able to help drive some of this. And so it's really on my team to the line that we always try and say is that we're looking to find what's new, what's next, and the best way to connect with our consumers. And if we find these solutions, it's about us saying, okay, this is a brand that has a challenge that they're trying to, that they are only reaching a smaller, they need to expand their audience. They see there's an opportunity. So we think that this test or pilot or proof of concept is what is needed to help bring them to the next level. And so we're always looking for those times. And it's about having the ongoing dialogue with the different leads in the different sectors for us or business units for us to find out where their focus is and where we could potentially help with the solution.
That's what I always said when I worked at Unilever. I was looking in the audience of brand marketers of like, who's actually like perking up, or where's that hand raiser? Because we'll start with you.
Yes.
And then
always makes the process easier.
In the best way possible. And I love the ROI study. I mean, it's very similar to kind of Mondelez's journey of how do they improve ROI, the fact that you guys are digging into this and finding the proof points for your brands to show that this can work. I think similarly, Innovid just partnered recently with the ANA on a recent CTV deep dive, and the findings were pretty conclusive around how nascent this space really is in terms of the tools and moving the space forward. But the first finding just being that reach absolutely has not been maximized to date. And it just to quantify this, the average campaign is delivering about 60 TRPs in general, which if you're all familiar in how to manage those, that's relatively light. So tons of upside there. And obviously, I definitely hear your comment but we need to find out how to get there in an efficient way and making sure we're looking at the analytics to plan appropriately and get there, right? And that's really Innovid's job to help in that area. The second area is really just around, is there an issue around frequency and duplication? From the majority of campaigns that we looked at, there was actually, it was a bit of a misconception, and they'd found that the majority of campaigns, about 85%, delivered a 1 to 2 frequency. I think we all have seen those outliers where that's not exactly the case. And so also most important to actually use the tool and making sure that that's working in that way. And then I think the last piece is just around, leveraging the pipes that are available, whether it is your first and or third party audiences that you are using to drive performance, and making sure that we're bringing your measurement partners along the way, kind of a thing. Perfect. Good. So one more reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, go ahead and plug them into the Q&A box. And we'll actually kick it off with this first one here. It's a question for you, Kate, around what startups are included in the latest generation of Pepsico Lab participants. And if you don't want to get specific on names, even like categories of areas that you guys are interested would be helpful here.
Yeah, well, I can speak to some that are public, thanks for asking and for the interest. As I mentioned, it's my favorite thing that I've been able to do at Pepsi so far. And so this is my third cycle of Pepsico Labs programming in the organization. The first cycle that I went through was all about creative excellence and creative intelligence. And two partners that we have longer standing relationships coming out of that are Creative X, which is a digital pre-testing. It's an AI-based digital pre-testing tool that can help us be more predictive in what's going to be successful in our digital marketing efforts, because we know that creative contribution to ROI can be in the 30 to 60, 70% range. I've seen numbers as high. So there's a huge opportunity for us to just be much more effective in everything that we're doing, because I think what I've heard from most CPGs and including us is that there's an opportunity to increase our actual testing against digital, where we know that our TV or video assets tend to get much more rigor before they go live. Vidsy is another, it's a development platform that we've been leveraging more coming out of that pilot. And so it's been some efforts that we're continuing to roll out across the organization. On this last go around, we had a few different terrains. Those included personalization at scale, as I mentioned, with a key that we partnered with. And there were a few other partners that we've also evaluated and had some success with in that space. We also focused on gaming as a terrain for that effort, knowing that there are over 2.7 billion people that identify themselves as that are identified as gamers. I don't know that they would always identify themselves, but when you think of the casual gamers to the more, Call of Duty type shooter gaming, the gamut of who's playing and how many people are playing is just massive and crazy. And so we partnered with a few different companies in that space, across Amzu, which is a integration, gaming integration type of company, with Green Park, which is a real fan engagement tool in the gaming space, really interesting new space. Stream Elements, who helps tie us with influencers. And then, the other pillars of last cycle's go around was about competitive intelligence or sports intelligence. And there are a couple of partners in that space that have been really demonstrating some amazing results for the organization that we're hoping to scale beyond. And hopefully once we have those things signed off on, I can share a little bit more insight into that. But this next round that we're actually commencing now, which I encourage people to reach out if you do feel like you have an opportunity to submit to potentially become part of the program, are all around competitive intelligence, performance marketing, and then what we're calling cultural interceptions. And competitive intelligence is really just about the idea that as everyone's continuing to migrate more into the digital space, there's such a black hole of information of what's actually being reported and syndicated on investments or efforts there. So we're looking for solutions that can help us better identify what is being spent in that space. On a performance marketing angle, I think we talked a lot about the e-com space and about how we really need to ensure we're optimizing our business. And so it's really important that we build the capabilities internally to ensure that we will be on the forefront of what we need to do to be the best marketers in worldwide is our goal, and bring more smiles to the people around the world, which is PepsiCo's mission. And then the last area is about cultural interceptions, and it's something that I think is the most interesting area, because it can go across so many different areas. And I think gaming can fit in there, but it's also about how do you reach these consumers in this much more fragmented, challenging marketplace where people have the ability to ad block or to skip the channel or to, use their DVR to fast through. So how do we integrate into programming or provide new ways to connect with these consumers in engaging ways that are authentic, that are not intrusive, but really can enhance an experience versus being, some of that annoyance that advertising can sometimes be.
Like moving with the flow versus completely impeding it.
Exactly.
Got it. Kate, one of the things, we didn't struggle with, but we kept on having to reimagine, right? At Unilever was trying to figure out how do we not just create the center of excellence and the discipline and the thought around social strategy, gaming strategy, et cetera. It's not about just build it and like set it off in the closet in Jersey kind of a thing. So Holly has a question for you about how do you think about and structure ways for your PepsiCo experts to be visible on digital platforms? The rise of the power of the individual voice is fascinating, as employees and leaders have sometimes more cred than the brand in certain circles. Without calling out any names, probably. How do you think about this just in terms of creating the thought leadership in that space, but it's a challenge to syndicate it and get it around the world, right? So how do you do that?
Oh, scaling efforts is my number one priority. And I think to do that, it's all about like change management, and change management, I am learning, is the most difficult thing to do, especially in such a massive organization like PepsiCo. But I think what it boils down to is a lot of communication and a lot of finding the right message paths, the right support to really, and also the right proof points. I think you have to have a very strong use case and very strong support data for reasons to change on why this will help benefit. And as long as you have a really tight story and are connecting with the right people and continuing to share those updates, those insights, and the support to help drive it through, is the way that we're finding the best way to bring it to life. Some of the rollouts that we're doing with like the Creative X platform, it's a massive effort to incorporate and embed this into our organization. And so having those ongoing discussions with the organization worldwide, and having, the smaller group sessions when necessary and the larger, to make sure that everybody is informed, educated, and understands the value to the change.
Yeah. Kate, if I can, we didn't discuss this one, but I think it's important for both of us, is around the role of the agency. And you and I both came from the agency side. I always made the comment, the best marketers sat in the agency chair at some point, if nothing else, for empathy of what does it look like on the other side, but also know-how. And there's such a key component to the overall mix and how it all gets done. We used to joke about it. We would do a day of ad day on Wednesdays where there would be like 20 pans of Chinese food sitting in a conference room with the CMO all the way down on the Gatorade brand. And we'd build an agenda and figure out what do we need to work against, and let's get the cross-functional team together and go at it. In today's world, any day could be an ad day because of Zoom, and maybe that's a good thing and maybe it's not. So could you just talk a little bit about the evolution of the role of the agencies and how they partner?
No, absolutely. And it's funny, I think Wednesday must be that ad day, because that was pre-COVID. That was when I would go and sit in OMD's offices for the day on my media role, while I was in the media strategy team. And the agency continues to be a huge partner for us. So we've got, our global team at OMD are such strong valued partners for us as part of the labs program, because, to integrate it into our business and to ensure that we're doing these proof of concepts and pilots, we need their support and their dedication to helping drive the similar agenda. But I think we all recognize that, that the traditional, I think there is an evolution to how our agency resources are, and all companies, at least I know that many companies, and many in the CPG space are looking to be more self-reliant, and there is a lot more taking ownership of some of this work, but that does not mean that we don't still need and value the work of our agency partners and still will rely on them for strategic resources. They are our partners in everything that we're doing and are so valued for all the work that they do. And I know that the lab's work that we've been doing could not be completed without them. And so I don't see that, changing. And I think that having a strong partner that knows your business, that you can trust through that, is really imperative to having, great success in the marketplace.
Fantastic. Pearl, welcome back.
Thanks, Barrett. Great conversation, you two.
Kate did all the heavy lifting. Absolutely.
Kate's quite the rock star. We're really lucky to have her on stage.
Very good. Well, Pearl, thank you very much for the time. Kate, thank you very much for the time and discussion. It was fantastic getting to know you better, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kate.
Bye.
All right, we're on to our last session of the day. We saved the best for last. We have Dan Gray. He is a Brand Innovators OG. He now manages the digital labs at Ford Motor Company. And his fireside chat will be moderated by Leslie Cohen, the Director of Brand Partnerships at Ben. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Pearl. How are you?
Great. How are you? Looking great.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. We're just waiting on Leslie to pop in. How's it over at Newport Beach?
Great. The sun is shining, so
No fires burning.
No.
Let's check in on Leslie.
Hello. Sorry about that.
Hello.
Let me
No worries, Leslie.
my background and oh, let me see. That's not it. It's
Well,
the
the
other
color
green
scheme
one.
Close
it
enough.
is.
Close enough.
All right. Good
All right,
seeing
looks like
you.
you're
Such
ready,
great
Leslie.
conversations today. This is I'm glad you saved the best for last, but the others were amazing. So yeah, I'm excited to talk with you today, Dan. To introduce myself, I am Leslie Cohen. I'm the Director of Client Development at Ben. And if you are familiar with Ben, we are the global leader in branded integration space. We work with brands to create meaningful partnerships inside of popular entertainment. It's across film, streaming, linear, music, and influencer. But I really want to get into your role and your lab, your digital lab at Ford. So it'd be great to sort of hear more about what the digital lab is at Ford and your position in leading that team and the role you have and the team has within Ford.
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity, Leslie and Pearl and Brand Innovators. It's great to be a part of the panel. Yeah, this is an exciting space, and especially what my day-to-day role is within Ford. So very simply put, Ford Digital Labs is a digital center of excellence, right? So, we're kind of like a digital marketing hub dedicated to creating and sharing best practices across our entire organization, whether that's social, tier one media, everything that we touch in the digital space. But we drive efficiencies, effectiveness by really being disruptive, challenging the status quo through structured testing, measurements, and learning. So again, it's a really important part of our company because we often do postmortems of how different campaigns ran, what can we have done differently, and especially in this ever-changing landscape, it's important for you to do that look back because there's always new learnings. But now I've been with the company, I've been with Ford for 17 years.
Wow.
And it's really interesting seeing where my career has started and where it is today. Kind of this digital center of excellence wasn't even a thing when I was first starting. But my different roles have gotten me to here, and I've been in digital for the last several years. So it's really an exciting part of the business, especially as things are changing so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like Barrett had mentioned the engine within the engine, right? All puns intended for you guys. It makes a lot of sense. But it's really hard to talk about emerging media trends without touching upon the last year and a half and COVID and the real effect in accelerating many of those current emerging trends that we're seeing now and we're experiencing. You know, what's here today, is it going to go away, you know, in the future, or are these the actual trends that we're going to be experiencing? So due to COVID specific to the automotive industry, I'd have to imagine there were limited auto shows, right? No in-person or very limited showroom visits, test drives, none of that. So it really brings up the point of how did Ford accommodate sort of new car rollouts without these in-person visits for the past year and a half? I mean, that's got to be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, great question. I can go on and on about this topic. This could be its own topic, but yeah, I mean, the shutdowns and COVID affected our industry tremendously. I mean, when you look at the manufacturing and the supply chains that it takes to build a car, we're still seeing the effects today with the global microchip shortage that is affecting the entire industry right now. But, you know, the last year and a half has been a really pivotal point for Ford. We came out with some truly defining icons. When you take a look at the Ford Bronco that we launched last year, that hadn't been in the market since 1996. We brought in our fully electric Mustang Mach-E, which is a Mustang that's a four-door SUV that's fully electric. And then finally, we've electrified our Ford F-150, the Ford Lightning, at the same time. So these are huge vehicles for us. And we really had to pivot on how we were going to, first of all, launch these vehicles, but secondly, how we're going to get people excited about it. So the first launch was with the Bronco. And what was interesting with that is that, you know, this is an off-road vehicle. This is something that you really can't see the scale of what this vehicle can do unless it's kind of like more of seeing it in its environment, seeing it like go over some rocks and seeing and going through the mud and things like that, really taking it off-road. And so we had a opportunity to launch this vehicle across many different platforms. And we partnered with Disney, which with ABC Disney, and we really tried to find these audiences that would resonate with the Ford Bronco. So we were on Disney Plus, we were on National Geographic, and we were on ESPN. And so these were audiences that we could really resonate with them, show just incredible footage, incredible content that we made specifically for each platform. And then also just this digital aspect that ABC Disney has too. We were able to take advantage of that. With the Mustang Mach-E, we did a live streaming event, but what was really incredible about that is that we also wanted to show what the Mustang Mach-E looked like. And so we had a augmented reality opportunity for people to engage with. So that was really important because for a lot of our customers or a lot of the people that were looking at the Mustang Mach-E, this is something they had never even, it's hard for them to conceptualize that. And taking a look at the technology and see how that would work for them. And they're saying, wait, you're making a Mustang and making it fully electric, and it's an SUV. So we really wanted to take them and have them be part of our journey. And so I'm happy to report that, 70% of our vehicles, of our Mustang Mach-E vehicles right now are being purchased by conquest customers, so customers that are new to Ford. So that was really interesting too. And then lastly, the Ford F-150 Lightning, our fully electric F-150. We did a live launch of that just a couple of months ago, and really just to talk about the capability that you're really not giving anything up when you're driving an electric vehicle, especially electric truck. And so that was really interesting. But again, during the pandemic, we had to shift, we had to move, and digital was a huge part of all those launches. I'm happy to report that auto shows are coming back. We just had the Chicago Auto Show just last week. So you can't replicate the smell of a new vehicle, how it feels, but we're doing our best to make virtual or digital experiences for people to really connect with our vehicles.
Wow. Well, I'd love to test drive all three of those, but I'm lucky enough to be in a position to be looking at a new car right now, and I have my eye on that Bronco. That is one cool car. That's very, very cool.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. So you just mentioned all these incredible new emerging platforms that you've been using, and new technologies. How are those decisions made? How does your team work with your media team counterparts in terms of where to allocate the dollars? What is the most effective? Sort of like, the behind the scenes. How is that done?
Well, we work hand in glove with our media team. So everything that we do, we are in lockstep with them. But there's certain metrics that we look at that really try to hone in on those KPIs that we're looking for. Mm-hmm. We're constantly evaluating new partners. We're constantly evaluating new platforms, and in each one of them will play a different role. But I think scale is really important for us. Mm-hmm. And that's why I mentioned before Disney. Disney was able to scale across the board with what we were looking for. So that was a great partner for us to use. But when we look at other partners, we want to look at scalability, but we also are interested in those audiences that those media partners have. And of course, we have our first party data, third party data, but again, we want to be relevant. And I think that's really important too. And so we are constantly looking to modernize. We are constantly looking to play to our strengths, but then also disrupt ourselves. And so we have those conversations with the media team. We take a look at our data and analytics to see, how we're performing. But it's a really good relationship. And, my department has been around for roughly 3 years. And, it's just a really good give and take. And I think that's what makes it work so well.
That's awesome. You had mentioned different types of content, so much of it, right? And there's so much engaging, great content being created. But one of the big differences is that because there's so much of it, not everything is being created for mass reach, right? There's a lot of niche content creators, content opportunities, platforms, places. What role does the content play in reaching your consumer? Does that sort of, is that something that you look at specifically outside of the reach? Do you look at it also niche and narrowly?
100% we look at that. And when you're looking at the car buying cycle or the purchase funnel, when you're buying auto, you really have to reach the customer at the right point, right? So are we looking to get awareness? Are we trying to lift our brand affinity? Are we trying to kind of just put our name out there? Or are we really trying to be lower funnel and being really prescriptive and having that customer or purchaser, effectively saying they want to click to buy. They are ready to buy tomorrow. And that purchase funnel is, we have to be really considerate about that. And again, we want to be in all places because we want to, be a challenger. We want to play to our strengths. We want to, show the vehicle and get the customer what they want, whether that's specific options, whether it's the needs of their family or them as a personal driver. We want to answer those questions. So where we place our media, how we place our media, and to the audience we place that media to, we want to make sure that we're making the content specifically for that platform, right? So it's not a one size fit all. And we take a look at that every day. I'll give two examples of kind of like some fun content that we've created. Number one is in the gaming space, right? If you're familiar with the game Rocket League, we created
who isn't, right?
Right. But we created a special edition F-150 to be played in game, which is, we had our Ford designers work with the game developers to create this vehicle. And the really cool thing is that we took this, digital concept or this, in-game experience, and we actually built it out. We actually built the game vehicle and made it real. And so that's been on tour right now. The Rocket League F-150, you can see it in person at some auto shows, and it's going around the country right now. So that's pretty cool. So that's number one. Number two, and this is a Leslie, in your wheelhouse, it's like, what are we doing to bring our brand into entertainment? Mm-hmm. We created a mockumentary film called John Bronco. John Bronco was the pitch man for the Ford Bronco back in the 60s. So think of John Bronco as kind of like a Marlboro Man or John Wayne type figure. And we showed, I won't give up the story, but you can find it on Hulu. But it talks about Ford releasing the new Bronco. And so that was something else that was entertaining, but then also got people excited about the new product that was coming to market. So those are two kind of fun content productions that we did to go into certain media.
I mean, those are both so incredible. I mean, having two teenage sons, the Rocket League car, I mean, that's going to be a huge thing in my house. So we're going to have to see that for sure. And I will say that up until I had seen John Bronco, Spinal Tap was my favorite mockumentary, but this blows it away. It is so good. I encourage everyone, if they haven't seen John Bronco, spend the 40 minutes on watching this short. It is amazing. Cameos, amazing.
Thanks, Leslie.
Yeah,
I'm glad you get your seal of approval.
I loved it. Shifting gears a little bit, another really important emerging trend that we're seeing playing a greater role with brands is social causes and the ways in which brands are addressing them. And the ways that brands address these issues, definitely affects consumer purchase decisions, including cars. You have this incredible perspective, having been at Ford for 17 years in different departments, and sort of having seen the evolution of some of these shifts. What are some of the biggest shifts that you're seeing at Ford in terms of addressing social, environmental, sustainability issues, the big issues that the auto industry at large is tackling?
Yeah, I mean, great question. And I think this is really important to talk about. So when we talk about a company, a legacy company like Ford, who's been around for 118 years, what does Ford stand for? And I think customers or people that know Ford, they want to do business with Ford. It's like, hey, do they have common values as me as a person? And they want to do business with them. So, that's something that you can't fake. It's got to be authentic. And at Ford, our purpose is to help build a better world. It's where every person is free to move and pursue their dreams. And so it's something that we hold very dearly in our hearts as part of our DNA, because we feel that, okay, everyone should be able to move. Everyone should be able to be free. But I'll go back to, my entire career is like, what does your company stand for? Our company didn't take any bailout money during the Great Recession. That was huge. As far as sustainability goes, Ford was the first auto company to come out with a sustainability report. That was 22 years ago. So it's not something that is new to us. We feel that it's so important, this annual sustainability report, that we have included it into our annual financial report that we share amongst our shareholders, because we feel that sustainability is so important. And honestly, it can be a competitive advantage. And we take a look at, our social issues and what Ford's done. Ford has been around for 118 years. Like I said, we serve our communities. Our dealers serve our communities. We provide employment for not only here in the US, but globally too. But Ford has a history of helping minorities in STEM education. So young girls in STEM education, contributing to HBCUs, doing work in the Detroit area, but also all over the country. And I think more importantly, Ford's always there to help when natural disaster strikes. First responders are usually driving Fords. So whether it's wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, you're going to see Ford show up, because these are communities that we serve, but these are people that we serve too. And I also like to say that Ford also is very, very involved in Ford accessibility, which is making sure those that have handicaps are able to be transported around, they're able to drive, and we have the accessories or capabilities to make it easy for them to get into our Ford vans and our Ford trucks and our Ford vehicles. So it's important. It's important to our company. And like I said, take a look at what companies have done, not just in the last couple of years, but what they've done traditionally. I think what we've done differently is we're better at storytelling. We're better at telling the story of what we've always done. Now we're able to do it and communicate that better.
That's so awesome to hear about all of that, because that's really that's the DNA of any company, right? And it's not, like you said, something just that you jumped on the last 3 to 5 years. I mean, that's something that Ford has been invested in. It's been important to them. And, I hadn't realized about all the first responders. Now that you mention it, yes, they do. So many do drive Ford vehicles. So it's great to hear about that stuff. And
I will
really,
say, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
I will just say, and I didn't touch upon it enough, but I want to talk about like electrification. I was talking about, what we've done with the Mustang Mach-E, we've done it with the Ford F-150, but total spending for Ford, we're going to spend up to $30 billion by 2025 in electrification, but also battery development. So I think that's really important. So it's not just, hey, we're coming out with a Mustang Mach-E or a Ford F-150 that's electrified. This is our strategy going forward. So we're anticipating that by 2030, 40% of Ford's global vehicles will be fully electric. So, so I think that's really important too, to see not where we are at today, but kind of where we're going as, environmental sustainability is kind of like this big important thing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you touched upon that, because that was sort of where I was going with, electric cars and things like that. But, outside of electric cars and all the technological advances in the auto industry, as we sort of wrap up, and please, everyone, feel free to ask questions because we'll get to those in a few minutes. What are you most excited about, right? Not only as a Ford employee, right, but also as an auto consumer. Like, what gets you most excited about the industry, the space, where it's going, sort of all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great time to be in the auto industry, I think, because it's truly a shift. Because what I was saying about just the investment that's going into electric vehicles, what I haven't talked about is what's going into autonomous vehicles, right? So,
Yeah.
So Ford has partnered with Lyft and Argo AI, which is kind of autonomous vehicle company. We've been piloting this for a while, autonomous vehicles, but we are going to be in 2 cities, Miami first, and that you're going to see that by the end of the year, and then Austin, Texas is next. But we're going to be having Lyft autonomous vehicles that are going around picking up people for rides. Now, there's going to be somebody in the driver's seat that's making sure that everybody feels comfortable and just monitoring it. But you're going to be able to see all the sensors, all the analytics, all the technology that's going on as a rider to be more comfortable in riding in an autonomous vehicle. I've done it myself before, and it's very, very cool just to see all the calculations that are going on at the same time. But yeah, if you're in those 2 major cities and you're a Lyft customer, you might be able to be picked up in an autonomous vehicle.
Wow. Yeah, I would think the first couple of times you ride in an autonomous vehicle, it would be nice to, yes, have someone there, sort of like as a proctor, right? Make you feel comfortable. But if not, just seeing the things happening, I think has to really impart a sense of safety in the passenger. That's, you sort of want to see how this is moving, how this is going, what's going into it, and all the different, sort of moving parts. So we're gonna head into questions, but I definitely want to end my questions on a lighter note. And being an auto guy, I can't be the only one wondering what car you're driving these days. So what are you driving?
I mean, I don't want to disappoint you. Like, I would say I have this classic car that's sitting in my garage that, I wax every weekend, treat like my baby, but I don't. I drive a 2020 green Ford Escape. It fits my lifestyle. It's a great, just everyday driver. I tend to switch out of my vehicles very quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly, I would say test driving vehicles all the time. But I've driven tons of vehicles. I will say that my first car with the company, I was talking about it before, I got recruited right out of college, and I show up to work, and my first company car was a red Mustang convertible. And,
I mean, how good is that? First of all, just to have that car in and of itself is amazing. But then you show up in that. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
I wasn't expecting that. So that's a nice little treat.
That's awesome. So we do have some great questions coming in. I'd love to get a few going. Okay, so this one is interesting. What brands do you look up to, and what leaders in marketing do you admire? Who are you sort of following, and who's like someone that you're very interested in?
Great question. I like to follow sports brands, and so marketing wise, I like to follow Adidas and what they've done in the digital space, in the e-commerce space. I think that's really important. Mm-hmm. I feel like with some of their limited releases that they've done to build hype and get people excited and see through culture is just really interesting. Their partnership with Kanye West and Yeezy, that's a phenomenon in itself. But more importantly, I think, that's their e-commerce platform and how they get people excited about the brand. So that's something I like. As far as marketing leaders, I don't really have one in particular that I look at. I tend to look at fast food as things that people are doing to push the envelope. I feel like that's an area that is important. It's very strategic, and again, as consumers' tastes change, whether it's Impossible Burgers or more of a health kick or farm to table, I find fast food in that market, how are they shifting and how are they developing what in their eyes is their secret sauce is important. So those are kind of like the two industries that I look at. So I hope that answers the question, but those are two big things that I look at.
Yeah, Adidas is such a great one to watch, but I do sense a John Bronco Wrangler collab. I said that could happen. So that, it's a good one.
Yeah.
So next question, how has the crisis forced modifications to short, mid, and long-term goals? And how do you measure success based on changes in consumer behavior? So sort of a two-parter.
So right now we're having a huge inventory issue because of an issue, right? And the microchip shortage. So it's not only a global automaker issue. We share those microchips with phones, TVs, everything. As cars get more and more technology, these are things that we are competing against with the mobile phone companies, with personal electronic devices. And so when you think of all the parts that vehicles rely on, and this one thing is so important, that's something that can hold up the whole process. But what we are looking at is more of a, just in time, order process where customers have more, ability to customize their vehicles. So I think traditionally you see when you're buying a new car, it's a lot of times it's like what's available on a dealership lot, right? I think this has really leaned in to, okay, customers want what they want. They know those accessories that they want. They know what color they want. They know what they're willing to pay for. But how do we speed that up as a manufacturing company? So I think that's the big thing. And I'm sorry, what was the second question?
How do you measure success based on changes in consumer behavior?
Mm-hmm. I think just the demand for it. When we look at electric vehicles, are customers really ready to take the jump to go fully EV? So there's also plug-in hybrids that take in electric or gas, but are people really willing to take the leap of faith and understanding their driving habits? Our Mustang Mach-E goes 300 miles plus on a single charge. So, so it's one of those things where are people willing to take that leap of faith and say, okay, I'm ready for this new technology? And so it's one of those things of looking in the future, and that's how we see success. And so we don't have a history of, okay, are people going to get the extended range battery? Are they going to get the kind of lower range battery? Are they willing to pay more to get that extended range? And so part of our strategy was people making reservations for their vehicle. And so we could have a better lead time of, okay, these are how many batteries, and this is part of our supply chain as it comes through. So we're not caught producing too many of the wrong variant.
Yeah. I think that dovetails nicely because that's so much about the car buying experience and, and inventory management and all of that. This question from Becky says, she said, great to hear lots of future developments besides the autonomous cars and electric cars. Are there new developments around tech innovation in the newer model cars that could change a consumer's in-car experience?
100%. I love this question because we have the ability to reach those customers and understand driving habits, make it easier for them. And so at Ford, we have over-the-air capabilities for our modem-enabled vehicles. So we're going to have 33 million vehicles that are over-the-air update that we can, just the same way that you get an update on your phone or your computer, but we'll have 33 million of those by 2028. So the experience, you're not going to have to take it to a dealership or something to get your computer reflashed, or it's all going to be done over the air. And so one of those things is as a consumer, we want to make the experience better, for the customer, for the driver. And so there's technologies, there's cameras embedded in the vehicles that we can optimize, we can improve, we can fix bugs or anything like that. And so I think that's really important. We're also partnering with Google for some of our in-vehicle technologies as well. So we have a leader in that space that can really help us with kind of like must-have products and services. But then we're going to be having those services as well. So look forward to some of these, like I said, over-the-air updates and the current that are modem enabled, and then some of our future vehicles that will have that too.
I mean, that talk about convenience, that is going to be a game changer. I mean, the less amount of times you have to go or the light comes on and you're like, what do I do now? I don't know what to do, you know, or at least I don't. So that I think is just going to create a really good consumer experience. Hi, Pearl.
Hi, Leslie. Hi, Dan.
Hi.
Hey, Pearl.
That was so fascinating. So many great things to hear of what you're doing over there at Ford. I mean, I love hearing that you're investing, what, $30 billion in sustainability and electric cars and battery development and all the AI technology. I mean, that's great coming from a person that doesn't have a driver's license. So bring that on. So thank you so much, Leslie and Dan, for that great conversation. We hope to have you both back again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks,
this was
Dan.
a lot of fun. Thanks, Leslie. Thanks,
Great
Pearl.
chatting. Take care.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, thanks so much to Dan and Leslie for closing out the day strong in the future of media on new media and emerging channels. It was a great day of speakers, and we are excited for all our upcoming days on this topic. We hope that you will all join Brand Innovators next week on Monday, August 9th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time for the Sports Marketing Upfront Summit. We will be joined by marketing leaders from State Farm, MGM Resorts, United Airlines, PepsiCo, AB InBev, State Farm, AT&T, NBA, Google, and many more. Thank you for joining